April 23rd, 2016, an Ohio tourist named Roquel Bain climbs the Trestle. She is looking for the legend. She is looking for the thrill. But what she finds isn't a monster. It's a freight train moving at 30 miles per hour. She has nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. And in seconds, the legend claims another victim. This isn't just a ghost story. This is the deadliest urban legend in America. There are places in America where stories cling to the landscape more tightly than the trees or the soil. Places where local legends grow so deep into the ground that they shape behavior, inspire rituals, and even lead people to their deaths. But what makes certain myths so powerful? What convinces rational people to step onto an active railway bridge at night, knowing the danger, simply because they can't shake a whisper in the back of their mind telling them to go a little farther? Today's investigation is not just about a creature. It is about why stories like this have survived for generations, why they thrive near places of real danger, and why a community like Louisville continues to speak in hushed tones about a figure many believe lives beneath an old railway trestle, a figure half man, half goat, and entirely rooted in fear. This isn't a retelling of the old Pope-like monster story. This is an exploration of the deeper mechanisms that allow legends like this to emerge, evolve, and eventually shape the culture around them. What is it about the Goatman that keeps drawing people toward a trestle that has already claimed numerous lives? Why does this myth, in particular, refuse to fade? And what can these repeated tragedies tell us about how humans confront fear itself? This is the psychology, the folklore, and the dangerous reality of the Goatman.
Long before anyone in Kentucky whispered about a creature stalking a railway bridge, ancient civilizations had already carved the template for him. Cultures across the world created figures who were half human and half beast. But the goat hybrid was especially persistent. In Greece, satyrs roamed the wild as symbols of unrestrained instinct. In Rome, fawns danced at the edge of civilization and temptation. Their hooves represented the boundary between human order and natural chaos. Their horns suggested they saw more than humans were meant to see. These early figures were rarely villains. They were mischievous and sometimes unpredictable, but they also acted as guardians of sacred places. Their role was to embody what humans feared within themselves: impulses, desires, untamed instincts. When societies evolved and religious frameworks shifted, the goat's symbolism changed sharply. What had once been a figure of freedom became an omen of corruption, danger, and the supernatural. This shift mattered because it laid the groundwork for all future Goatman legends, including the one in Kentucky. Once Christianity spread through Europe, anything with horns or hooves was quickly associated with demonic forces. These creatures no longer guarded forests. They lured unsuspecting wanderers deeper into them. They no longer symbolized instinct. They represented corruption. This psychological shift explains why modern Goatman legends almost always appear in liminal spaces, places where humans are already vulnerable. Forests, old roads, bridges, railway tracks. places where the landscape itself demands caution. The human mind reacts strongly to transitional environments. They are neither fully natural nor fully built. They feel isolated, but also connected. They provide enough space for imagination to fill the gaps. And when a place like that has a history of accidents or unexplained deaths, the mind begins to search for meaning. Before the Pope Lick monster had a name, he already existed inside that psychological vacuum. America's mythology is surprisingly young compared to much of the world. Instead of ancient ruins or medieval castles, the United States built its stories around expanding railroads, isolated highways, abandoned factories, and structures that were both lifelines and hazards. Railroads in particular developed their own brand of superstition. Conductors told ghost stories to pass the time on long night routes. Rural communities whispered about strange figures spotted along the tracks. Deaths were frequent enough that people needed explanations, and folklore stepped in to do the job. This is where the modern Goatman archetype took root. Reports of horned humanoids began spreading through Maryland, Texas, Arkansas, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania during the 20th century. The descriptions varied, but only slightly. The creature was tall, muscular, and walked like a man, but moved with the strange bending gait of a hooved animal. Sightings usually occurred near railways, ravines, rural bridges, and lonely stretches of road. To an outside observer, the pattern is obvious. These are all places where people already feel uneasy. They are liminal spaces again, zones of danger, darkness, and vulnerability. But to those who experience something firsthand, the rational explanations fall away. If someone claims they saw a horned figure staring at them from the tree line as a train thundered past, it does not matter whether psychology can explain it. The fear is real. The meaning becomes personal. The Pope Lick monster did not appear in a vacuum. Kentucky simply became the place where all the elements aligned. An isolated bridge, a history of accidents, a region steeped in local folklore, and young people with a desire to test the boundary between bravery and recklessness. The railway trestle at Pope Lick Creek is enormous. It is tall enough that a fall would almost certainly be fatal, yet long enough that anyone caught on it by a moving train has nearly no chance of escaping. The tracks vibrate long before the engine arrives, but by then, the only options are to run, jump, or be pulled under. The structure was built in the 1920s, a time when railway construction prioritized efficiency over safety. There were no platforms, no escape walkways, and no guardrails. The bridge was never meant to be walked by pedestrians. In fact, it was designed to make walking it nearly impossible. Yet people did. They crossed it during the day. They crossed it during the night. They climbed the fence the city eventually built around the area. They ignored the warning signs. They stood on the tracks, waiting for a thrill, or a story, or a glimpse of the creature they grew up hearing about. For decades, local newspapers documented tragedy after tragedy, each one adding another layer to the myth. Even when authorities confirmed that the deaths were caused by nothing but trains and misjudgment, the community whispered something else. They said people acted strangely near the trestle. They said they felt pulled forward or watched or compelled to step farther across the tracks than they intended. This is where folklore becomes something more than a story. The legend of the Goatman began shaping the behavior of those who believed it and even those who didn't. Because the moment someone steps on that bridge, their mind becomes vulnerable. Height, darkness, the faint hum of steel, the sense that the structure could tremble beneath your feet at any moment. These are conditions that heighten perception, amplify fear, and make every sound feel significant. A person in that state does not need to see a creature to feel its presence. The legend does the work for them. Psychologists have long understood that fear can distort perception. When someone enters a place with a frightening reputation, their senses become hyper-attuned to anything that confirms the danger. A rustle in the trees becomes a stalker. A shifting shadow becomes a silhouette. The low groan of steel expanding in the cold becomes a scream. This phenomenon is known as expectancy shaping. Once the mind expects something, it begins filtering reality to match the expectation. The Pope-lip trestle is the perfect environment for expectancy shaping to flourish. It is quiet enough for sounds to carry unnaturally far. It vibrates with the faint echo of wind passing between metal beams. The height distorts depth perception. The darkness distorts distance. The long linear structure forces the brain to interpret every noise as directional, either approaching or retreating.
Every local legend undergoes evolution. Details shift. Motivations change. Some versions grow darker. Others become absurd. What matters is not the accuracy of the details, but the psychological need they serve. The Pope-lick monster began as a simple rural scare story told to keep children away from the railway. Then it evolved into a creature who lured travelers to their deaths. Then it became a half-human escapee from a secret laboratory. Then a cursed farmer transformed by an unholy ritual. Then a demonic entity bound to the bridge itself. Each new version reflects the fears of the generation that tells it. In the mid-20th century, Americans feared scientific experimentation gone wrong, so stories of hybrid creatures created in government labs spread through rural communities. In the 1970s and 1980s, horror fiction embraced demonic imagery, so the Goatman became more supernatural. In the 1990s and early 2000s, urban legends focused on dangerous dares and paranormal encounters, making the creature a symbol of risky thrill-seeking. The myth adapts because fear adapts. What the creature represents changes, but its presence remains constant because the environment, a dangerous trestle, has not changed. Every generation of Louisville teens hears the same warnings. Stay away from the bridge. Don't climb the fence. Don't walk the tracks at night. Something is out there. Whether they believe the creature is real is irrelevant. What matters is that the story provides a reason to test their bravery, a way to perform courage in front of peers, a chance to participate in something whispered, forbidden, and thrilling.
This is the same psychological drive that pushes people into haunted houses or abandoned buildings. But the Pope-Lick Trestle is not a staged attraction. It is a real structure with real consequences. A haunted house is designed to scare without harm. The Trestle was never designed with people in mind. This distinction is crucial because the Pope-Lick monster does not need to exist physically to kill. The myth itself is powerful enough to lead people onto the tracks. Some myths persist only because they are attached to a specific place. Remove the place and the story collapses. Remove the story and the place loses its meaning. Pope-Lick Creek and the Goatman exist in this symbiotic relationship. The Trestle is visually imposing, isolated, and structurally dangerous. It invites exploration, but punishes mistakes. The moment someone climbs the hill and sees the bridge stretching across the ravine, the environment begins doing psychological work. This is why the legend refuses to fade, unlike other cryptid stories. Bigfoot can live anywhere. The Mothman might appear in multiple states, but the Goatman of Pope-Lick is immovable. He belongs to the Trestle like a spirit bound to a shrine. The environment gives him form. And because the environment cannot be removed, it is still an active railway used to transport freight. The legend remains active as well. Every time someone reports a strange sound, every time a local newspaper recalls a fatal accident, every time a group of teenagers sneaks past the fence just to see, the story deepens its roots. The community keeps the legend alive, not because they want to believe in monsters, but because stories like this serve a purpose. They warn, they entertain, they explain the unexplainable. They give shape to fear in a way that feels tangible. But when fear becomes tangible, it also becomes dangerous. Many cryptid stories lose momentum when the environment changes. A forest is cut down, a road is expanded, a town grows too large for myths to survive. But the Goatman legend is protected by something stronger: ritual. Visiting the Trestle became a rite of passage. Groups go not to hunt monsters, but to test themselves. The story becomes a challenge, a dare, a bonding experience. These rituals create real memories which reinforce the myth for the next generation. A legend becomes powerful not when everyone believes it, but when people keep interacting with it. The second reason for longevity is secrecy. Locals often refuse to discuss the legend with outsiders, except in vague or dismissive tones. This natural hesitation adds an air of authenticity. When adults avoid a subject, teenagers become more determined to explore it. The third factor is the blend of realism and mystery. Unlike stories involving flying creatures or supernatural transformations, the Pope-Lick monster feels physically plausible. He is described in a way that resembles known animals. He exists near human structures, not deep in inaccessible wilderness. People see eyes, silhouettes, shapes, movement. The brain easily fills in the rest. This mixture of believability and danger is what makes the Goatman feel more real than other cryptids. The legend of the Goatman is not fundamentally about a creature. It is about how humans confront fear. It is about what happens when folklore intersects with real-world hazards. It is about the thin line between curiosity and recklessness. Most importantly, it reveals a truth that applies far beyond Kentucky. Humans are drawn to the edge, not just physically, but psychologically. We are fascinated by stories that blur the boundary between the known and the unknown. We return to them even when they warn us away. We seek them because they offer a glimpse into something beyond the everyday. When a story like this persists for decades, attracting both believers and skeptics, it becomes more than folklore. It becomes part of the cultural identity of a place. The Goatman of Poplik is a symbol, not of supernatural horror, but of the patterns that define human behavior. The desire to explore forbidden spaces, the compulsion to challenge danger, the fascination with stories carved into the landscape. And yet, as tragic as the history around the trestle is, the legend continues to evolve, not because the creature demands it, but because the human mind does. Whether the Goatman exists physically is irrelevant to the power of the legend. The truth is more unsettling. The story thrives because it feeds on human psychology. It feeds on curiosity, ritual, fear, and the instinct to confront the unknown. And as long as the trestle stands above Poplik Creek, the legend will continue growing. Some will visit out of belief, others out of disbelief. But all who stand beneath the towering steel lattice or hear distant trains echoing through the valley will understand, in some way, why the story refuses to die. The Goatman does not need to show himself. The landscape does the talking for him. And sometimes a legend is more dangerous than any monster could ever be.